All right, class, settle in. Welcome. Today, we're going to tackle some of the biggest, toughest questions out there, all having to do with the economics of our health. Think of this as a mini lesson on the kinds of hard choices that doctors, hospitals, and entire governments have to make literally every single day.
So just look at these questions for a second. Are cigarette taxes a good idea? How do we decide how to pay doctors? Which life-saving drugs get funded when we can't afford them all? I mean, these are huge, right? They seem completely unrelated. But what if I told you they're all connected by one single fundamental idea?
That's right, there is one core concept, a single starting point that helps us unlock how to think about all of these problems. It's really the secret key to understanding this entire field.
And that's my promise to you right now. In the next few minutes, you're going to get a brand new toolkit for thinking like a health economist. You'll have a clear, powerful way to analyze these tough choices. Ready? Let's get into it.
So, what is this one big idea I keep mentioning? Well, it all comes down to one word: scarcity. This is the absolute bedrock, the very reason the entire field of economics even exists. This is day one, lesson one for any economics student.
You know, the textbook definition really says it all. Economics isn't actually about money. Not really. It's about choice. It's the study of how we make decisions when we simply can't have everything we want. Because, and this is just a fact of life, we can never have everything we want.
And this right here perfectly illustrates that central problem. On one side, you have our wants, which are basically infinite, right? We all want better health, more services, the newest technologies. But on the other side, you have our resources, the money, the number of doctors, the time in a day, the equipment, all of which are limited. This fundamental clash between our unlimited wants and our limited resources is the problem of scarcity.
Okay, so if scarcity is the problem, how do we deal with it? How do we even begin to think about making good choices? Well, class, for that you need the right tools. And I'm about to give you the two most powerful, most important concepts in the entire economist's toolkit.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The fantastic health economist Gavin Mooney once joked that if you happen to fall asleep in a lecture, your best bet is to just mutter something about opportunity cost or the margin, because there's a good chance you'll be right. That's how central these two ideas are. So let's make sure nobody falls asleep here. First up, opportunity cost. This is so crucial. The real cost of any decision isn't just the price tag. It's the value of the next best thing you had to give up to get it. Every time you choose to do one thing, you are also choosing not to do something else. And the value of that something else is the true opportunity cost. Okay, let's make this real. Imagine a hospital with a fixed budget. Follow this table with me. At the top, if they treat 0 inpatients, people admitted to the hospital, they have enough resources to treat 50,000 outpatients. Now watch what happens as they start treating more inpatients. Follow me all the way down to the bottom row. To treat 5,000 inpatients, they can now treat exactly 0 outpatients. So what was the opportunity cost of treating those 5,000 people? It wasn't just money. It was the 50,000 outpatient visits that couldn't happen. That is a massive trade-off. All right, that was tool number one. Now for our second key tool. Let me just ask the class a simple question. It feels obvious, but is more healthcare always better?
The answer to that question lies in this idea: marginal analysis. This sounds a little academic, but all it really means is thinking at the margin. Instead of looking at the totals, economists focus on the effect of the next one. What's the additional benefit and the additional cost of just one more test or one more dollar spent?
Let's see this in action with colon cancer screening. Check out this data. The very first screening test is amazing. It finds nearly 66 cases for just over $1,000 each. Great deal. But what about the next test? The second one only finds 5.5 additional cases, and the cost for each of those cases jumps to over $5,000. You see the pattern, right? By the fourth test, we're spending almost $500,000 just to find the tiny fraction of one more case. The benefit of each extra test gets smaller and smaller. We call that diminishing returns.
And then it gets really wild. For the sixth screening test, which isn't even on that chart, the marginal cost, the price to find just one more additional case, is a jaw-dropping $47 million. Just let that sink in for a second. Is that a good use of our limited resources? Thinking at the margin forces us to ask that really hard question.
Okay, so we have our problem, which is scarcity, and we have our two main tools to think about it: opportunity cost, and marginal analysis. So, what are we trying to achieve with all this? What's the point? Well, any health system is really trying to balance two major goals.
And those two goals are efficiency and equity. Efficiency is all about getting the most bang for our buck. It's about maximizing the total health of the population with the resources we have, making the pie as big as possible. Equity, on the other hand, is about how we slice that pie. Is it fair? Who gets access to care and who gets left out? And here's the really tricky part. These two goals often pull in opposite directions.
And just like that, you've basically got it. This is your new superpower. You now have the fundamental framework to think just like a health economist. So let's do a quick recap to make sure these big ideas really stick with you. Here's your toolkit in a nutshell. First, it all starts with scarcity. We can't have it all, so we have to choose. Second, every choice has an opportunity cost. The real cost is always what you're giving up. And third, always think on the margin. Focus on the impact of the next step. And listen, if you only remember one thing from our time together today, please let it be this. Health economics is not about being cheap. It's not just about saving money. It's about a much bigger, much more important goal. Figuring out how we can get the absolute best health for the most people, using the limited resources we have. It's about being smart so that we can be more effective and more compassionate. So, here's your homework. Now that you have this toolkit, how does it change the way you look at the world? What's the biggest health challenge you would tackle first, and how would you use these ideas to do it? Think about the scarcity, the opportunity costs, and what's happening at the margin. Okay? Class.
But on the other side, you have equity, which is all about fairness. Is the care distributed in a just way? And here's the kicker. The most efficient solution isn't always the one that feels the most fair. And that tension, it's at the very heart of almost every health policy debate. So how do all these different pieces actually fit together? To really wrap our heads around the full scope of health economics, what we really need is a map. And lucky for us, a brilliant economist named Alan Williams already drew one. And here it is. I know, it looks like some crazy plumbing diagram, right? But it's actually an amazing model. If you look at the far left, you've got the general things that determine our health, lifestyle, diet, the environment. As you move to the right, you see how those things create a need for healthcare. That need is then met by the supply of doctors and hospitals. And see how all these pipes are flowing toward that final outcome on the right? That's the health of the population. It just perfectly shows how everything is connected. Okay, let's be honest, that diagram is a lot. So for study purposes, it's way easier to break the field down into these key themes. We've got health and its value, which is box A in the diagram. Then there are the other determinants of health, like your lifestyle. That's box B. Then you've got the supply of health services in box D, and then how we actually evaluate all of this using microeconomic evaluation in box G, and then shape the entire system with policy, box H. See? It's a much clearer way to structure the whole field. So we know what health economics studies, but how does it do it? What are the actual practical tools that economists use to go from theory to real-world policy advice? Well, that brings us to something called economic evaluation. The formal process for all this is called Health Technology Assessment, or just HTA. You can think of it as a really structured way to gather all the evidence on a new drug or a new medical device or a new procedure. And a massive part of any HTA is the economic evaluation, which basically answers the million-dollar question. Is this new thing actually worth the money? Okay, this slide right here is gold, especially for exam revision, so pay close attention. It lays out the main types of economic evaluation. Now notice they all measure costs in money. That's the easy part. The key difference, the thing you have to remember, is how they measure the outcome. Cost effectiveness, for example, uses natural things, like life years gained. But cost utility analysis takes it a step further and uses something called a QLI, a quality adjusted life year. A QLI is so clever because it doesn't just measure how long you live, but the quality of that life too. It combines them into a single score, where 1 year in perfect health equals 1 QLI.
So let's just lock in the difference between these two, because it's a super common point of confusion. Cost-benefit analysis, or CBA, tries to put a price tag on everything, including the health outcomes themselves, like a year of life. It's powerful, but as you can imagine, also really controversial. That's why cost-effectiveness analysis, or CEA, is so widely used. It avoids that whole problem by keeping the outcomes in natural health units.
And all of this brings us full circle. We've developed all these sophisticated tools to measure efficiency and cost-effectiveness.
But using these tools brings us right back to that fundamental tension we talked about at the very beginning.
This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? The most efficient choice, the one that buys us the most health for the money we spend, it might not always feel like the most fair or the most ethical choice to us as a society. And so we're left with this final, really challenging question. The tools of health economics are incredible. They can tell us what's efficient. They can tell us what's cost-effective. But what they can't tell us is what is right.